Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our annual Cedar Valley Anti-Racism Coalition book read. This year's book is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Pulitzer Prize winning author Isabel Wilkerson. Wilkerson is no stranger to the Cedar Valley. Some of you may well know that UNI brought Professor Wilkerson to campus a few years ago as we explored together her award-winning book and national bestseller, The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration. And it chronicled, African-American migration from the South up northward. And they settled in places like Chicago and in fact, Waterloo, Smoky Row area over there by some of the churches on the northeast side of town. She also taught at Princeton, Emory, Boston universities, and has lectured at more than 200 other colleges and universities across the United States, Europe, and in Asia. We want to thank Cedar Valley Anti-Racism Coalition, by the way, a conscientious group of members representing the Metroplex here in the Cedar Valley, who have a heart for transforming community for the better. And we would especially like to thank Gwen Berry, the Chief Diversity Officer at UNI, as well as Rick Seeley, Manager of Learning Technologies at UNI, and one who has become a fixture for these panel discussions, Anton Ryder. We certainly appreciate all of their work and all of their special teams members for helping make such discussions like this one even possible. Tonight, we have a co-moderator in Joe Leibold. I would like to call him friend. Major Joe Leibold has been the Waterloo Police Department for more than 30 years. Boy, that seems like a long time. And he has had the privilege of working in various assignments over his career and currently serves as Patrol Division Commander with the Waterloo Police Department. So we're grateful to have Joe here today. And Joe, perhaps you can help us learn who the other people are on the panel tonight.
Well, Abraham, thanks for the welcome. I'm having some technical issues and I'm using my cell phone, which is by no means any fun for me because I can't see anyone else that's on the panel because the screen's too small. I'm still working on a laptop on the side trying to get it going. Yeah, as you said, I've been with the department for 30 years. I've done a lot with our agency and I'm fortunate to be here. I'm at two disadvantages. One, I have a technical challenge, and two, I haven't read the book. So many of you have an advantage over me, and I'm hoping to learn a little bit tonight from all of y'all. And you're gonna have to introduce yourselves because I have no idea who else is on this call.
Oh, okay. Well, I can actually see them. So why don't we start with Brooke Hewer?
There, I think I'm unmuted. I'm Brooke Hewer. I'm a lieutenant for Cedar Falls Police Department, Public Safety Services now, I guess. I've been here for just about 21 years. I'm currently on third shift patrol. But I've been on every shift, been in the training unit, been in investigations a number of times. And I actually did get through the book, so hoping to have a good discussion tonight.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. And by the way, you don't have to have read the book in order to engage vibrantly, robustly tonight in this conversation. Jessica Roush.
Hi, I'm Jessica Roush. I am one of the social workers at the Black Hawk County Jail working in jail diversion. I have been there for just over a year now.
All right, fabulous. Welcome to both of you. And the other person I see is Wilmot Willington.
Sorry about that. Using my cell phone as well. My name is Wilmot Wellington, residential officer at the Waterloo Residential Facility. I've been there for about 7 years. Just looking to have deep discussion tonight about our community and what is going on.
All right. Well, welcome to all of you. And Joe, if you have some questions to unload, then please begin, sir.
All right, has everybody got me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I just wonder, and I know there's several law enforcement officers on the panel, and I know we all face similar challenges. What barriers do you all face when you're trying to recruit a more diverse candidate into the professional law enforcement?
Well, I can tell you just from my perspective of being here for a while and usually helping with testing, I actually proctor a lot of the tests. we have very few applicants. For one, just applicants in general right now. But two, for a diverse population, we really just don't see that many people applying for us. And we've been trying to figure out ways over the years to make it better. But, you know, it seems like anything anybody's tried, it just isn't working for us. So it actually would be helpful if anybody on the panel has any ideas for us too, because we're always willing to gather ideas and take suggestions.
Yeah, Jessica, maybe you can go with the same question.
I'm not so much in the recruiting department over at with the sheriff's department, but I know that they have been working with the other deputies and detention officers to try to figure out how to get candidates in and get them hired quicker. They're running into the same issues that I think all law enforcement are. There's just not many candidates out there. And then on top of it, passing all of the physical and written requirements. And so they've developed just a little subgroup and subcommittee to try to develop different ways to work on that recruitment process and try to get people in for their interviews along with testing quicker. I know Captain Neff has more information on that piece.
Yeah, oh, and he wasn't able to join us tonight. And then Brother Wellington, we asked you the same question. It's Joe's question. Maybe you can just explain that in your context, sir.
Well, so I'm a residential officer, but also I coach at the high school at East High, and I'm well into the community, and just some of my experience from talking to kids and talking to teenagers who's going to be joining our working community and go into jobs like these. And once they realize what I do for a living, you know, the first thing they say is, oh, well, it seems like they say you're a cop, you're a bad guy. That's kind of what, you know, the sense I always get into it is. But you know, when we sit there and then we explain, you know, our jobs and our duties and what, you know, what it means to the community and to everybody else, you know, we getting kids start having different opinions and different, you know, information that is given to them versus what they have been, you know, been provided while growing up. So, but when it comes down to hiring, I really don't say much. I can't say much about it because I don't know that much about the hiring process within the department and our candidates and who's getting hired and whatnot.
Okay, and Brother Wellington, I just want to say before Joe takes the floor again, we can't see you. Is that on purpose? Do you know?
I'm sorry about that. I was driving. I just made it home. I was from practice. I just made it home. So when I get in the house and get behind it, I'll get my screen open up here.
Oh,
I just
okay.
pulled in the driveway. Yep.
I just didn't want to go forward without at least, you know, pointing that out that we can't see you. So, all right,
Yes,
Joe.
sir.
I'm gonna go a little bit into social media. I mean, we all look at social media, and I think most of us are aware that it tailors what we see to what we look at, and kind of keeps us from seeing a diverse perspective. How do you feel that affects you as a person, and how do you feel it affects someone from a different culture or a different background, because their Facebook feed or Instagram feed or social media looks entirely different than yours? They see the world differently, and in today's day and age, our world is tailored almost to make us not diverse.
Wow. Why don't we start with Jessica with that one? Because Joe, you still can't see everybody, right?
I can see nobody. I'm trying to get another set of headphones so I can work off my laptop, but I'm just
okay. Yeah, we'll go with Jessica first on this one, and then Brooke.
So that's a great question with regards to social media and what we do see. It's you know, when you look at the news, it's biased and based off of, you know, people's political views and their forecast, and that's exactly how social media is, and our friend groups are, you know. And so we've kind of, I mean, truthfully, in the past few years, we've really learned, I think, our personal friend groups, where they stand in some of these political views that we may not have been aware of previously. And that's been brought to the forefront of just with everything that's been going on here in the world, of just being able to learn what people's perspectives are and to try to figure out how to have that conversation. And they're very difficult conversations to have with people, especially when you don't agree with their political views or you don't agree with the stance that they're taking. And having it be on social media like this is such a large platform that it's scary, the amount of people that are just allowed to say what they want to say without any remorse or without having to be held accountable, which it makes me fearful, just because people are just feel that they can do what they want.
Brooke, same question.
Sorry, I'm in a different office and I'm working the mute unmute thing and it's not working out very well for me. So yeah, I think right along with Jessica, you know, there's a lot of there's, oh, I was hearing some back feed there.
Yeah, there was
That
a
might be
little
me, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
So, you know, I think it's information's tailored, people follow what they want. So sometimes it's easy for others to, you're sometimes not getting a whole story or a whole picture. I'll tell you, just from the perspective of being on patrol and being an officer, you know, there's been situations where I've offered help to people and their response to me has been, I don't want to talk to you, kill us anyway. And, you know, I've been here for 21 years. I've never done that to anybody, but there's a perspective, you know, and I think the media and social media fuels that we're all bad, we're all out to hurt people. And that's not my goal when I come to work every night. I don't think that's any officer's goal. I think the majority of officers are trying to help and do the right thing. But I think we can all agree that there are and have been bad officers out there too. And so when you have that social media component and everybody's getting this information, I don't know how much stuff is always getting fact checked. And that's the frustrating part for me.
Wow. Yeah, Brother Wellington, social media, that same question. And we can see you now.
Okay. I didn't really catch the question. I was leaving from the car to the vehicle. What was the question again?
Joe, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I got you. Let me get to it on the list here. Social media kind of tailors everybody's view, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You know, if you start looking at something, you know, you look at table saws one day and then now you're seeing table saws all the time. So we all tend to stay in our own little groups, and social media tailors you to what your group wants you to see. How do you think that affects your ability to work, and how do you think it affects the community as a whole to kind of come together? It seems to force more of a divide than it does a connection.
Okay. Yeah, you know, with the other two, I also agree with, you know, with the kind of effect social media plays on our job and just you know, being in general, just in the community. Because like you just said, I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on. Once the trend is going, everybody picks up on there. Once you see a bad cop is doing something, everybody think everybody is bad, you know, and that's not the right thing. But the thing about social media, we all have to understand is that even though social media amplifies what is going on, but the problem also, it comes from something that we're being taught, you know. Growing up, and I'll just share a little bit of my story. Growing up, by the way, I'm African. You know, my family migrated to the United States when I was 6 years old from Liberia. So with that information, growing up, I was always told, you know, hey, when this is going on, this is what you do. When, you know, cop asks you this is what you need to do. And so you get that information going on. And then when something happening in social media, it's almost like an instinct. It's like something you grew up to, saying, hey, this is what I was taught. This is what's going on. This is how I have to respond to it. So, you know, working in a correctional setting, you know, working with Black inmates and white and Mexican and whoever it is, you know, I sometimes we get the sense of, you know, we hear some of the black guys say, hey, you're supposed to treat me just like one of you. I'm like, no, that's not how it is. You know, everything is fair. Everything is equal. I don't treat you any less than I treat the next man.
But what we have to understand is that social media kind of puts into perspective that, hey, there's this group of people doing something, so I have to jump on the bandwagon with them when it's really not the case. So, to your question, yeah, it's what we're dealing with now with social media amplifying everything that, that we do as law enforcement officers and, and as peace officers. But, it's just like you guys are doing a good job. Just explain, hey, I'm here to help. I'm here to do what I got to do. So I hope that kind of answered the question a little bit.
I thought that was very interesting. Joe, you got another question?
Sure. We all deal for recidivism, both on my side, the jail side, and the corrections side. And what do you think, does each of you think is the biggest factor on recidivism? Who, people that just keep coming back into the system, and the ones that don't, how are they successful?
Let's start with Wilmot this time.
Yeah, all right. Well, yeah, it's so I started working at the department when I was 24 years old. Just got out of college. I kind of pursued my NFL dreams, and that went down crashing. So when I went into the department, I was young going in, and I had the goal and the mindset of changing the world. That's what I went into. And about a year in, I realized it's not my choice. It's based on, the individual, if they want to change and if they're willing to change. And it was kind of hard for me at first, because some of the guys that I kind of built relationship with, talking to, when they're in the facility, that they're great. They did everything they were supposed to do. They stay out of trouble, stay out of drugs. And it was a routine. It was good. And when they left the facility and went into the community, within months, they're back in prison, back in jail. And it was the same process. And so I realized that, that these guys there was nothing that I could do, right, for them to do it, for them to commit whatever, when they go into the environment, when they go into their community, what the challenges they're faced with, right? It's easier for them to give into that versus when they're in our setting. Hey, you got to do things our way. You got to do this structure. And so I have seen a lot of guys that go in and out, but the ones that actually, leave and go is it's kind of different with those guys, because they establish a purpose. Okay, I got a family that I got to take care of. And so then they started putting their values into place. And some of those guys we don't really see. I would see them at Walmart. I see them in the street. Hey, Will. I'm like, yeah, hey, what's up? What's going on? I haven't seen you forever. Yeah. But it comes down to the value and how they go along, and who they're hanging out with. Those are the guys that don't make it back. And the ones that do make it back, in our facility, like I said, is those ones that really cannot cope in their environment. And
well, Brooke, maybe we go to you, and then we end with Jessica. You have any feedback on that?
Still working on that. So yeah, I think with what Wilmot was saying is very interesting, because it is, you see people who do well when they have the structure and or maybe, still having to report to a probation or parole officer. They're having to do certain things, but then once they don't cut ties with the people that are getting them into trouble or helping them get into trouble, that seems to be where there's issues over and over again. And just a quick story from my career here so far. I grew up in Waterloo. So, I still know a lot of people that I went to school with. There's, I run into people all the time just from growing up in the area. And there's somebody that I know that I went to school with who early on in my career shot somebody, went to prison, came out, shot somebody again, went back to prison. I can't tell you like how many times I've seen him go in and out. And that just baffles me, because for one, it's frustrating to see it happen. You hope people learn lessons and do whatever, but like Wilmot said, people have to want to change, and they have to want to change what they're doing, and they have to have some kind of a goal or perspective that's different from what it was before. And when nothing changes there, you see that continue revolving door.
Yeah, if I might interject here a little bit, I can imagine that has to be tough from your perspective, Brooke. I know you see a lot of it. Because there is a pathos out here, especially when it comes to shooting, the notion of shooting another person. something pathological is going on there. But we're also aware, and I guess Wilkerson kind of points this out in the book Caste. Michelle Alexander kind of points it out in her book, The New Jim Crow, that there are a lot of people who actually go in, they pay their time for their crime, but what helps create recidivism is the fact that they can't even get a job or they can't find housing after they have paid their time for their crime. And they're not wrestling with these other pathological pieces that help make up sometimes the mind of those that keep going back in and out. These are people who really want to start over. They want to start afresh, but now they've been confined to a civic death. That's what Michelle Alexander refers to it as. It's a civic death because you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't even go to school in some situations. You can't even get a good education. You can't borrow money to get a good education because the felony prevents you. The arrest record prevents you from doing some of the things that you aspire to do. And so it makes a joke out of this idea of rehabilitation. You rehabilitated me for what? I'm still confined to the same caste that I've always been confined in. So I don't know, Brooke, did you want to answer that, or should we go to Jessica?
No, I don't think you're wrong in that, and it's frustrating to see. It's frustrating as officers to see even people with, let's say, a bad driving record. You know, that's a continual cycle for them. If they need a car and they need to be able to drive to get to their job, but then they're not supposed to be driving because their license is suspended or barred or revoked or whatever, and then they get pulled over, and of course they're not supposed to be driving. And then again, how do you get to work? How do you have a family and get to work and do all that? I mean, it's very difficult for people to figure out and work their way through the system to actually get to a good point. And that's something you definitely see, and you feel for people when you're working and you see those things happen, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate those answers. And I can only imagine what it's like. Is it tougher for you to deal with people that you went to school with, Brooke? I know I'm following up with you a little bit more than others this time. I'm sorry, but is that tough?
At first it probably was. When I was younger, you'd be in a situation like walking through doing a bar check, and there's people that you grew up with, and they're doing things that they probably shouldn't be, and you're just trying to work, and it does make for a different dynamic. But generally the people that I've bumped into over the years or so, I grew up with them, so I get along with them fine. That's, I guess, how it is. I don't, other than it is a little bit weird, especially if there's somebody who has been in trouble quite a bit. They might treat you a little bit differently, but
yeah,
not like I'm out to get people either. So.
Right. Well, let's go to you, Jessica. Do you remember the original question?
I think I remember the majority of it.
All right.
But you certainly hit it right on when being released, from jail or for prison. Employment, education, housing are all things that have been very difficult and are additional causes to that recidivism, because if you can't get a good paying job or obtain a higher degree to have that job, might as well go back to, thought patterns, go back to doing what you were doing. You made money that way, society's not giving me a chance. And so one of the things, at the jail that we've really been trying to work on to try to help folks when they're leaving is just re-entry, getting them prepared to going back to the community. And so we've been able to team up with employment opportunities and educational opportunities to bring those into the jail. And we are able to let inmates sit down, meet with folks from Hawkeye, folks from Iowa Works that are able to sit with them and talk to them about different types of career paths that they could obtain and sustainable careers and careers that they may not have thought they would ever have the opportunity to pursue. And they're finding out that maybe being here or their past may not necessarily be a barrier to keep them from gaining that employment or furthering that education. And so for a few folks, these programs are pretty new for us at the jail. And so we are just now getting some people, finally up and rolling with educational courses and things like that. And I think it's really made a difference. They are able to pursue their goals. They're following through with their values that they hold dear to them, and they have an action plan so they can meet and be where they want to be. And so for some of those folks that have been able to enroll or get started with those opportunities, we have not seen them back at the jail yet. And so I want to say that I will never see them back behind those walls again, and then I'll just run into them on the streets or at the convenience store and say, how's it going? But that's one of our ways that we're really trying to reduce that recidivism. We're trying to provide people the opportunities to know that they're more than their incarceration.
So true. Brother Joe, you got another question for us?
Sure, I got one more. So in law enforcement, with all the panel members, we attend a lot of training and a great deal of training. Over the last few years, that training has evolved. I'm just wondering if anybody has attended training that they felt was very valuable, they felt maybe was more damaging than it was helpful, or if they just have any suggestions on what training's out there that maybe we should pursue.
Jessica, would you like to begin for us this time?
Yeah, I know that a big push in the community has been CIT training, crisis intervention training, for all the officers for Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Black Hawk County. And that has been a big push to work with folks that are in the community that are in active crisis, along with not only trying to help de-escalate the situation, but also trying to divert to other services in the community, versus the first step just being take them to jail. This is what happened. And so I would encourage anybody, any of the officers who have not taken the 40-hour crisis intervention training. It's a great training. And you really get a lot of valuable information out of it.
You know, if I might just follow with you for a second, Jessica, I was just thinking, I'm reminded of a quote by James Baldwin. He says that to be Black in America is to be almost in a rage all of the time. And you just used a word that I almost feel like I can substitute for rage. Crisis. To be Black in America means that one is almost in crisis mode all the time, because you've got to navigate, you got to circumvent, you got to do a little extra sometimes, because of the cast that a lot of Black and brown people find themselves in. If Wilkerson were here talking to us, and I'm just wondering, you know, have you been able to tell a difference between Black and brown and white clients that you work with in terms of their ability to navigate the system?
It's a great question. I think that based on, and I'm trying to think of kind of the right words to say at the moment. What I have kind of, in my brief experience with working with people right now, it has been that what you have been able to learn while you've been growing up is what you know. And I know that's a poor explanation, but I worked with quite a few people that some of the things that, I just know, or I was taught when I was growing up, how to get a birth certificate if I've lost it, or how to get my social security card if I've misplaced it, or just how to make an appointment at the DMV, or how to make a doctor's appointment, or how to even have a conversation with a provider that you're unhappy with their services. Those are things that I've been able to learn from my parents from growing up. They were able to teach me that, and not everybody has been as fortunate with that piece to be able to have that type of background. And it's something that prior to working in the jail, it's not something that I had thought about. It's just I just knew how to do this. And so when I'm working with people, it's really, I'm just learning that we're all at different stages in our lives. And we're the product of how we were raised and what we were taught. And things like that might not have been what needed, that's what was taught to me, but there might have been other things in people's homes that they were taught, like we need, because they didn't have shelter or, stable shelter or, enough food on the table. And so they were taught different things.
Yeah, I think that's great. Wilmot, I want you to kind of reflect upon what Jessica was talking about a little bit, and let's play with this a little bit further, because I guess what comes to mind for me, and you, I think, do something similar to what Jessica does, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm curious to know, in your opinion, how much of this recidivism and some of the other things that Jessica was talking about might be a function of poverty. Maybe it's a function of race. Maybe it's a function of single parent homes. I mean, what is the issue? And you are fascinating, by the way, because you come from the mother continent, man.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
you weren't born here. You weren't born here, but you came over here at 6. So I guess I want to know, what were you indoctrinated with from 0 to 6 years old? And then you had to relearn, or you had to add on to something that you learned when you got over here to the States?
One of the best thing about, my family genealogy is we're from Liberia, and Liberia is, if you know the history of it, is it's kind of made up of Native Africans and slaves that was sent back to Liberia from Americas. So we got a mixture of those two. And because of that, I grew up with English. I grew up with, English speaking and whatnot. But the Liberian, there's 13 dialects over there. And my dad and mom and they all, they got their dialects and they speak their, that kind of people. And so, but unfortunately, I was one of those. And throughout the whole moving process and everything, we had spent a few times in Ivory Coast where I learned French there as well. Growing up, it was easy to pick up when you're little, and then finally came to the States over here. So with that note, I kind of knew a little bit about New English, and my French now is completely gone because I don't speak it anymore. But but coming into America and everything else, my dad is huge on education. At the time, he was a professor in Liberia as well, so he pushed us into education and learning. And so we all have education background. I'm one of 9, and every one of us is pretty much he made sure we took care of the books first before anything else. But going into our question and our discussion of what's going on, just being in the facility and all that is we picked up this practice called CCP, so core correctional practice. And basically the background and history of it is trying to teach staff how to communicate with our clients and how well, because like Jessica was saying, we all come from different backgrounds. When I moved to the States, we were poor. That I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up in Section 8 housing. I grew up, down where, in the east side of town, like places like that. I grew up in there. I know how to handle myself and everything. But there's some of my coworkers who, we have this discussion all the time at work, and it's awesome because the guys that I work with, are open-minded and they love to talk about stuff like this. But, at work, I that's another guy we work with. I grew up on the west side of the state in a really small town, who his views on, at the time was pretty much small, conservative, and his views and values, everything was small until he moved into a bigger city, into Waterloo, and actually saw that, hey, what I was being taught back home is complete. I mean, his world, he said, as he said, my world was flipped upside down. I had to learn something completely different. And so with us doing this practice is kind of teach, our staff member, hey, okay, we're all not from the same area. We all didn't grow up in the same thing. Our parents didn't all teach us the same. I mean, the schools, to be exact, my school taught me something different from what he was taught. You know what I'm saying? So we all have this different knowledge and different background coming into one, trying to work and help, you know, our residents get out of the facility and kind of, you know, get a life and never come back. But with that, it's like, so we, you know, we're teaching people how to, hey, if an African-American guy is talking loud, it's not that he's angry. It's not that he is being aggressive. It's that, hey, he's excited. That's what we do. We kind of, when we excited, our voice raised up. It's nothing threatened towards you, you know, but it's, you know, situations like that. And then, you know, we go through the role play and all that. And it kind of, you know, you kind of understand these group of people. Okay, hey, maybe we just got to sit down and talk to them, open-ended question and see what's going on so I can actually get down to the root of his problem. And so just piggyback on what Jessica is saying, you know, it's really hard because, you know, even growing up where I grew up and the knowledge I got, and you know, I'm fortunate to have, you know, I lived in Minnesota all my life, and I moved down to Iowa when I was a junior in high school, and I moved to Fairfield, Iowa. I was the second Black person in the school, and so I went from a diverse school. I was like 560 some kids. I went in there mixed with Black, Asian, Mexican, and everything. And I went to a school my junior year, which was there was no 2 Black kids, and everybody was white. So completely out. I had to, you know, I had to navigate, and I had to figure out ways and everything, how to deal with my situation now. And, you know, and kind of playing into that is that my understanding of how I was raised and my values, it changed, but it didn't change as much. You know, I understood kind of the new way I had to live and how to work and my surroundings and how I had to adapt to it. And so I don't know if that really answered your question, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, brother. You were taking us to some places that we really wanted to go. I guess if I can just follow up with you, and then we'll go to Brooke, of course. But I guess I'm curious to know if you ever felt that you were resigned to a certain position in society, that there was a ceiling that you would hit and you won't go beyond that ceiling. Were you indoctrinated to kind of believe something like that? And this is what Wilkinson is talking about in the book, Caste, that there are a lot of people, Black and brown, you know, that quite frankly are relegated to a caste system. A lot of our white brothers and sisters are in a more dominant caste system. And then there's a middle caste system too, that people are kind of stuck into. And I'm just wondering, you know, about what shaped you and what information you take with you as you do your job in law enforcement. Because I know you see some of the same kinds of people, I would imagine. And a lot of times it may be a function of poverty, it may be a function of educational attainment, it may be a function of family structure. I'm just curious, do these people belong to a caste? Because she would suggest that one of the pillars of caste is this notion of divinity and predestination. Some people are just preordained to be a part of the lower caste. And then there are others who fit in other castes. So that's where I'm going with this.
You know, I you know, reading the book and kind of looking back at life stories and kind of evaluating where I'm at now in life and other things that's going on. And I believe that system does exist. But kind of example is, you know, back in the day or even now then is if you think about it like this, if your dad and mom is a lawyer, the kid's gonna kind of eventually drift out into that kind of profession. And so if you think about it, that's almost, you know, or if your parents are a law enforcement officer, you know, they kind of go into that career field and that's something they want to do. That's something they're a part of. So if you talk about a system in that sense, I see it that way, because even as growing up, my dad, like I said, my dad was a professor. He taught agriculture and he got his PhD and everything. And so when we were growing up, he pushed us into the education and all that. And I have sisters that are doctors and all that. And we kind of was pushed into that role, like, hey, in society, if you want to do something, you know, this is what you have to do. This is where we have to go. Even though, you know, he's like, you know, you're going to have to work harder than everybody else. You're going to have to do everything harder than everybody else. I took the athletic background. You know, I went on playing football and getting scholarships and all that, and using that to get my education. But I do believe that, you know, with poverty and our economic status and all that, we are put into a system that we kind of not get out of, you know. And I always talk to my coworkers. I'm like, you know, we talk about economic status as rich, poor, and middle class, but in reality, it's just the rich and the poor. There's no middle class, because the middle class are stuck in this motion of, oh, hey, I got to work hard to get rich. And, you know, that never happens, because at the end of the day, you know, with all the obstacles that's in your way, you're never going to reach that ceiling. You're never going to get there unless you're, you know, you're an athlete or somebody where you kind of, you jumped out of that loop. And, you know, and I kind of talk, I reference to not Kobe, but LeBron James as into the book. And we were talking a couple nights ago about the same discussion is that, you know, he kind of referenced as to, it doesn't matter how much money you have as a Black person in this society, you're always going to be seen as that. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you have, and so when you put it into that perspective, it kind of makes it seem like you're always stuck in this part in this system that, you know, regardless of what your status is and what you are, you're that. You know?
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments, brother. Brother, I wish you would have made it to the NFL, because I would love to see you playing with Lamar Jackson right now. You know what I'm saying? The brother's having a breakout year, man. Yeah, but anyway. Yeah, so but we got to go to Brooke. We got to get some more voices in here. Brooke, you heard all of this, and you've had an opportunity to reflect upon it. And let me just piggyback on what Wilmot just said. He said that LeBron James, and he did say something about, you know, never being able to escape his Blackness or whatever the case is. And so regardless how much money, regardless how much celebrity status, he will always be Black. But you know what? LeBron saying that is far different than me and Wilmot saying that. So he's talking about regardless of what we do, regardless of our celebrity. But you know what? But he can go ahead and get this Cuban cigar, and he can get on a ship, a yacht, and go to Cuba if he chooses, or an island that he bought with Tyler Perry, and just relax as he reflects upon the oppression on other Blacks and Browns over here in the continent of the United States of America. And as he's sitting there pondering while looking up at the stars with his beautiful wife and children in this pad, far away from all of his problems, he's crying about the fact that he can't escape his Blackness, regardless of how much celebrity, regardless of how much money he has. I don't feel like that's quite the same.
I think you're right. I don't think it is quite the same. And, you know, it's hard to, you know, you have people that get up and they preach and they do whatever. And like you said, he's far away from dealing with what most of us would say are real problems of the world. He's got, you know, all the abilities to get away from things and to not have to experience things that other people experience. And so, you know, that's frustrating when you have somebody that's maybe in that position that's not being very realistic in how real everyday life works for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, so it just brings attention to me to once again this notion of caste and class, you know, because you can't help but talk about racism. You know, when you talk about people like LeBron James, and there's so many other celebrities and billionaires who are Black, not a whole lot of them, relatively speaking, but we do have billionaires who are Black. And it just raises the question to some degree, how much emphasis should we be putting on race sometimes, when in fact, class is such a big variable. Caste is such a big variable. Either you're in the dominant caste or you're in the lower caste. And just because there's some black and browns that made it into the dominant caste, doesn't mean that we should stop worrying about trying to destroy the caste system. Why do we have a caste system if we believe what Isabel Wilkerson says? Why do we have it? And one of the ways that we appreciate caste best is through law enforcement, because law enforcement a lot of times is the face of this caste system. It's the first interaction we might have a lot of times with caste, or with what some will call white supremacy, or what we call racial injustice. It's usually law enforcement, because you all are right there and you represent the system. You want to establish law and order. And LeBron James is quoted as he said that after a basketball player, who is a celeb and he makes a lot of money, he was thrown on the pavement by some police officers, and the weight of their bodies on top of his, made it very impossible for him to breathe. And for a season, he was disabled. He won $4 million out of that, and he donated the money. But LeBron was making the point, it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity. It doesn't matter if you have wealth. People like law enforcement, one of the many systems of a capitalist structure, still see you as Black. And so it just raises the question, and I kind of want to go back to it. Do you think that Black people in the system, who get caught up in the system with you all, have a much more challenging time, navigating the challenges that society provides for all of us than some of their white counterparts? I'm just wondering, have you been able to see any of that? Because we're saying that out here in the real world, we're dealing with all these isms. And the data that we have suggests that Blacks are 5 times the rate of white Americans in state prisons to be incarcerated. There are 12 states, more than half the prison population are Black. Iowa's not in that list, but Iowa is one of the 7 states that maintain a Black-white disparity larger than 9-to-1. We're in the list with California, Connecticut, Maine, of all states. I didn't know there were Black people in Maine. Did you? Maine, Minnesota, where you're from, Wilmot, New Jersey, and of course, Wisconsin. I was in that list though. I'm just curious. And Joe, can you answer that question? I know you were helping me ask questions, and I had the privilege of seeing these beautiful expressions on everybody's face. But what do you think about that though? Is it difficult with some of the, I'm curious, in your 30 years of police work, do you think that it's more challenging for some of the Black people that you run into to navigate some of these pitfalls that they might run out here in the real world because they are in fact Black or brown? There's some challenges associated with race or racism as to why they come back, why they get in the system again.
Well, I think it's changed a lot over my career. Currently, social media probably plays as big a role on that as anything. Abraham, your friend and mine, Felicia Smith, pointed out to me the difference in what I see on social media and what a 17-year-old African-American young man might be seeing on social media. And it formulates our opinions differently. And I think, that was probably highlighted the most in May of 2020 with the death of George Floyd, and the way people saw things differently. Even me and you, Abraham, saw things differently when it came to the trial. And we just, I was like, I can't see how you thought he was going to get off. And it's just, it's different now. And I think, I don't think law enforcement is really the first point of contact for a lot of people. I think that the issue starts younger than that. It starts in the schools. It starts in their parenting. And it just, there's so many things before we get involved. I mean, probably 80% of our contacts are reacting to something. We're getting sent somewhere. We're getting dispatched. We're getting called to a family fight or a child in crisis, and we're thrown into situations that, quite honestly, we don't want to be there either. I mean, we're there to help, and and it's changed over the course of 30 years. And like the officers we're hiring today are fantastic. They're great at it. They're great CITs, and not knowing everybody's tenure in the room. I know Brooke's been around a little while, but not quite as long as me. I won't age her. So, we've all seen different things, and we've seen the quality of our candidates. I won't say get better, but they're better communicators. And I think that's how you go into a conversation. If you're comfortable walking into the conversation, if you're uncomfortable, affects that interaction. And I think you can see, it's harder for some people to get out of the system. I think we probably all know people who shouldn't have gotten out, but have. I mean, they found their way out, and God bless them. I talk to one probably once a week who's been out of prison a couple of years now, and he did 17 years for a robbery, and he's solid, great guy. I'd do anything for the guy, but he had to work to get out. And there's a story that was told to me about people got arrested for drugs, and the only one that really got out of the system ever was the one with strong family support. I think that's probably where we suffer and where we see the recidivism is people come back into the neighborhood, back into their old buddies, and that's how they got in trouble in the first place. I mean, I've had friends whose kids got in trouble. And, man, you got to get him away from his friends. He's got to move. He's got to go out. So I think it does. It's another challenge. I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge. I think we're getting better every day at it, but we got to keep working at it. There's no magic pill here. There's no training class we can all take and be perfect. And we are dealing with humans. I mean, we got to hire, we got to recruit. Every interaction, you have a bad day, I have a bad day. If we hit them at the same time, that could be a bad day. So we got to be careful about that.
Well, I just think it's interesting that Joe actually mentioned the fact that we saw the George Floyd situation a little bit differently. And we're talking in particular about Derek Chauvin, right? The fact that I could not be confident that the jury would convict Chauvin. And Joe was absolutely certain that there's no way in the world that Derek Chauvin would get off of this. I mean, my God, he killed a man right there in front of millions of people. There's no way he's getting off. If that is not a perfect example of conditioning, man, in these United States of America, a Black man looking at the same situation a little bit different from another white man. Because Joe, being in law enforcement, said there is no way Derek Chauvin is getting off. I could not answer that question with that same degree of certainty because we had seen a lot over the last several years of people that many thought were guilty, that the system exonerated. And that is, quite frankly, an example of white supremacy, the notion of caste, the notion of racism, an understanding of law enforcement and how it works in these United States of America. Let's go to you all real quick. I mean, for instance, very quickly, Brooke, did you think Derek Chauvin was going to get off? Did you just know, like Joe, that there's no way he's going to get out of this one?
I think we all definitely hoped that there's no way he was going to get out. And I think most of us were pretty confident that he wasn't going to. And generally, I would say you never know what a jury is going to do. And that's, I mean, over the years, we've kind of seen that. But with something like what we saw, like, I don't know how he was going to be not guilty. And from an officer standpoint, we all hope that he was, because nobody wanted to work with somebody like that. So.
Yeah. What about you, Jessica? Did you think he was going to get off?
No, I thought he was guilty. And I mean, I can echo what Brooke and Joe said with regards to, you watched the videos, you saw what happened, and it was just, and, in my mindset, there was no way he was getting out of this.
Did you think he was going to get the maximum?
That's always the hard part, you would hope that they, one does, but that part I was unsure of, just because of the fact that he was law enforcement. It did put some doubt in me just with that fact, but I was hoping that he would.
Yeah. Brooke, did you think he was going to get the maximum? I mean, okay, so you thought he was going to be guilty and found guilty. Did you think he was going to get maximum time?
Yeah, I did. Just because, you look at the videos and it's pretty horrific. Like, how can you watch that and somebody not get what they have coming to them? And just when Jessica touched on videos, it made me think of just something to mention, and Joe definitely has seen it, but we've gone through our careers where, like when I got hired, we had VHS tapes in our cars. And then we progressed to like, you would have your audio, but you'd only see what was like directly in front of the car. And then now we have body cameras, and we've been through several versions of body cameras. And I think it's very interesting. The officers that we work with now, it's very frustrating to us when all that stuff is not working, because we're very dependent on it. We want people to see what's going on. We want there to be no question of like, hey, look, this is what was said, on both sides. And, so to me, that's been, just something that I was thinking about when she mentioned video, of how that's really changed for people over the years. And, it's really just to shore up so there's not a question most of the time. I mean, sometimes there's stuff left for interpretation, but the videos over the years, I think it's been a great addition to all of our departments, really. Yeah,
sure. Will Smith is famous for saying, in response to the question, are we doing a better job of cracking down on, unruly cops or something like that? And he said, no, not really. We're just catching it on film better. In other words, he was saying that it's always been there. We're just catching it on film a little bit better than we did in previous years. Well, the same question though about Derek Chauvin. Did you think he was getting off?
No, not really. I'm with Jessica and Brooke. I seriously didn't think that he was gonna get off. I didn't think our system was gonna go that route, but there's a flaw, and it went that way.
All right. Well, maybe I was alone. Joe, maybe you were talking to the wrong black man.
Yeah. I don't think so. I talked to more than just you, Abraham.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, we're going to wrap this up a little bit. We got about 3 more minutes left. And so this is going to be kind of like a fast round. But keep in mind this notion of caste, racism, challenges that have faced law enforcement with Black and brown people, probably is for as long as you've been working in your respective professions. But let me ask you, how are you fostering trust in the community? How are you fostering trust through what you do, so that we can hopefully, have a meeting of the minds with respect to race, racism, even this notion of caste? How are you fostering trust? And Joe, I'm gonna come to you last, okay? But let's start with Will.
As just with the law enforcement part of it, we got to understand, we got to see that, our community kind of, with all that has been going on within the years, where it's hard for them to trust what we do, that, they don't really see us as everyday 8-hour shift trying to help out. And some people do, but, for the majority of the ones that we're trying to, convince and make sure they stay out of trouble, is that, hey, we're not here to hassle you. We're here to keep our community safe. We're here to keep everybody safe. And, and in that route I think as just like I said, I coach at the high school, and just being in those young adults' presence and being able to educate them now, because from that, they're going to, jump into our working communities, and maybe some will end up in, I have seen a few of them in our facility, and, and I talk to them, I was like, hey, remember we had this conversation. If you keep doing this, I will be seeing you in my regular job, and, and when they get there and like, man, coach, you was right, I messed up. I'm like, yeah, I'm saying this to warn you ahead of time so you don't keep doing what you're doing. And, but, it's the few of them that, majority of the kids understand that, that they get it, they understand it. And then the ones that don't is just, we just got to keep, it's like a broken record. We just got to keep repeating. And I know it gets boring. It's old. It's something that we don't need to do because you're an adult. You need to figure it out like I did, but at the end of the day, we didn't all grow up in that structured home. We didn't all have 2 parents. We didn't have those means and those dynamics to get us to where we at now in life. And so, but where I'm at and what I'm doing, I'm encouraging a lot of my kids and a lot of, I coach the girls for track, I coach football. And so I'm encouraging these kids to, hey, jump into law enforcement, help make a difference, change our community, because the more you guys are into that role, right, the more, you deal with your peers now, like Brooke is, right? And so it's easier to kind of, hey, remember we went to high school together, it's kind of relate. Okay, maybe I should show this person respect because I know them and I need to listen to what they're saying versus an outsider who, doesn't really understand the dynamics of Waterloo and understand, the kind of the structure of Waterloo. And so their mindset is completely different from what Brooke would have, coming into the situation. So,
that's good, man. I appreciate this response. We may go over just a tad bit tonight because we wanted to capture Brooke, Jessica's, and Joe's responses. Brooke, how do you foster trust?
I think the biggest thing is just being open to communication, be willing to sit down with people. I've had mothers of sons that we've dealt with, like where we've, had them with us for a little bit and they wanted an explanation of why we had them there at the station. And, it only takes a few minutes to actually sit down and talk and have an honest, transparent conversation with people about, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing. And if we can really sit down and explain the reasoning why behind everything, and if people are willing to listen and you can have that open communication, that helps. I think beyond that, like being willing just to, meet people where they're at and to see what they're dealing with, and really knowing that there are obstacles to how people are living their life and what they have going on, and the compassion side of things, of knowing, obviously we still have a job to do. We still have to enforce the law. If people are out there hurting other people, we have to deal with that and take care of it. But at the same time, we can sit and have those conversations. And I didn't get my turnaround with the whole training question before, but I have gone through the CIT training too. And I'll say that was a very, very good training. I went to it last year. I've been an officer for how long, and we have brand new officers in there. We had officers that have been there longer than me. And just that reemphasizing, sitting down with people, talking, open-ended questions, listening more than you're talking, that kind of thing. And really hearing what people have to say and what they're trying to get across to you, and keeping that open mind.
Wow. Fabulous, Brooke. Thank you. Jessica, fostering trust.
I can echo what everybody has already said with that. I think the other, aspect, especially with being a social worker, is following through with, after our conversations, if there's things that I need to do on my end or information that I need to provide, that we're also, as professionals, we're following through with what we say we're going to do. We're not just walking away and saying, okay, great talk, it's on you, but just following through with all of those pieces, and then just walking with everybody, with somebody through those steps of what to do first, what to do next, until they feel more comfortable, is a huge proponent with regards to building trust with people.
Wow, fabulous. And Joe, you get the last word on this one. How do you foster trust?
Well, I think, they've all given great answers. So I'll summarize just a little bit. I don't think we can change the national narrative, so to speak, on trust between the community and law enforcement. I think that's too big an apple for me to eat. I just try to change it individually. And a story that comes probably to the top of my mind was, and Abraham's well aware, my son played sports all through Little League, all that. And I coached two young African-American men. They were probably 8 when I started coaching them, and probably 14 by the time they figured out what I did for a living. But when they got their license, their mom reached out to me and said, hey, will you sit down and talk to them about traffic stops and getting pulled over and how it works? And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, their view of that is entirely different than my 16-year-old son. And partially because of the law enforcement, so he's more comfortable around cops. But the other part certainly had to do with the race and their national narrative. And these two young men are friends to mine to this day. I talk to them on a regular basis. They're great kids. They're going to graduate college this year, as a matter of fact. But I think you got to build trust one person at a time. And we got to understand that, we're not always going to agree. And I'm going to steal a quote the mayor says: we can disagree, just don't be disagreeable. And I agree with that quote. I mean, Abraham and I don't always see eye to eye on things, but we always talk and we communicate. When I taught these young men about traffic stops, I told them just smile. If you smile, it makes things so much. It just reduces tension in everybody involved. We teach the officers that, just try to smile if you're coming in, and obviously you can't do it on all situations, but if it's just an interaction on the street or a traffic stop, be polite, smile, and I think we got to do it one stop at a time, one interaction at a time, and it grows very quickly when you have 123 officers all trying to build relationships, and they build them, and then it just expounds upon there, and it exponentially grows, and that's kind of the goal. We're fighting an uphill battle. Social media kills us. I'm not a fan, although I'm on it. I don't like the fact that it was mentioned earlier. There's no truth. I mean, whoever's first, it's just put it out there, and nobody checks it to see, and it's just it's unsettling to us, and it's affected our profession. I think it's affected our retention abilities. So I think you got to build it one step at a time, one interaction at a time, one contact at a time. There's people that call me because Abraham referred them, or somebody else said I'd help them out. I mean, I think I've got a little bit of trust in the community, but I'm not nowhere near where I want to be.
All right. Well, we appreciate all of your responses. Thank you for taking the time, and listening audience, thank you for bearing with us as we went over by about 5 or 6 minutes. We hope that you are enjoying your read of Caste, the origins of our discontents, and hopefully you can couch this discussion in your understanding of where you are in the book at this particular time by Isabel Wickelson. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.